Hello, everybody. I think we're good and I think we're live. Well, you can all tell me in chat what's happening. I'm a ghost right now, in case you're wondering where this voice is coming from. I don't know. I don't know where I am, but I do know I do have three people live with me right now who are here to talk about Superfuse. So I'm sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm Fiona and I'm a community manager at Raw Fury. If you'd like to, three of you go ahead. Who are
Yay! I'll
you?
just very quickly say my name is Paul. I'm a producer here at Raw Fury. We're strapped into Superfuse today, and we have a couple of the team members here with us. Tim, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Tim, one of the founders of the studio, and I do a lot of UI UX design as well on the side.
Among many other things. Yas, do
You
you want
wear
to
many
introduce
more
yourself as
hats,
well?
Tim. You wear many more hats.
Yeah, he was so
We
modest.
tell
I was
them, we
like,
tell them
wow, he's basically just called himself just I'm the UI designer.
this week.
Yas.
Yeah, I'm myself. Hello, I'm Jos. I'm the tech director here at Stitchheads, also one of the co-founders and working on Superfuse. I'm mostly just busy with bits and bytes, essentially. Super
Yes,
excited
that's
to
like
be here.
nice intro. So our UI designer has joined us today. The lowly UI designer intern, everybody. No, Tim is here to show us a little bit about what UI looks like, what it means, the ambitions for it, and ultimately what players can expect to see in Superfuse in terms of UI design. Tim, I'll let you kind of start us off from the very top. Um, Show us what you got.
Sure. So you just want to see something from the game, right?
I
You don't
say
want me to
just,
just
I
ramble on
say
about
get in.
UI.
I say
All
get it.
right.
I'm going to ask you a bunch
All
of
right.
questions
All right.
anyway,
Okay. Okay.
and harass you as we go.
Right.
But I think
Yeah.
we can show them some candy and get going.
All right.
Oh
So
yeah.
we've been working on redesign of something. So we've had obviously with these type of games. Skills and talents and all that good stuff is a big part of the game and building out your own character. I've been working on redesigning the design for those screens a little bit. So this been a recent focus, and we've got a version that we're ready to show to the public. So as you may have already seen in the past, we had these sort of skill trees for each individual skill, which were quite a little bit of fun, but they weren't really as interesting yet for what we can do with the system that we've built. So, as an example, I'll dive into a skill. We now have the skill creator, and I've cheated, so I've got unlimited skill points. Don't worry about it. You won't actually be able to do this. We're having all the fun. That's what we do. But you can upgrade your skill, and you can just drop everything in there for which we call fuses. So in this case, I'm putting in a passive fuse that's causing trauma. So there's ailment in our game. But we can also drop in fuses like knockback, for example.
Can we
And
can
these
we can we
fuses.
try this? Can I interrupt you, Tim?
Sure. Go ahead.
Could we could we kind of like explain it like I'm five mentality? Is there a way that we could reset this down visually to show exactly what it looks like that level one kind of stage? Like
Sure.
what is
Yeah.
that first moment that a player gets where they're like, I have an ability. I am level two, I'm level three, I have a point somewhere. How do I spend it and how does this kind of menu system open up and inform the rest of the scaling that might happen?
Sure. So, well, when you're going to be leveling up, you won't have access to all the skill sets. That's the first thing. So you'll actually unlock these to the talent tree, and the talent tree is still a work in progress as well. What you'll be doing is you'll be picking one of your powers, one of your superpowers, and you'll be leveling that superpower up. So as you level it up, you go through to the DNA trail and you unlock more skills as you go. You can unlock
So this like
passives.
this page as well, right? So when the players start out, what we're seeing is really a left to right progression on this page.
Yeah, yeah,
So like all of the center stuff that we see that's like highlighted red right now, and this is in the brute force portion of the talent tree. All of those red nodes, none of those would be lit up yet. All we would have is that far left one, isn't that right?
yes, correct.
So that'd
Yeah.
be just that guy on the far left. And essentially then our first point goes in there and you're kind of like you're coasted along this snake trail that we see going through this screen from left to right. And as players get more points and put them in, this trail obviously branches out as you're doing there. It kind of pushes further and further out to the right and then unlocks all these additional nodes, which are new talents and everything.
Yep, exactly. And
I
this is
love this
also
design. This design is like so beautiful. It's so aesthetic. And when I first saw these drafts and everything, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, Tim, but I just want to like lay some praise on you for like really how intuitive this is in terms of UIs in games. I feel like we've come to a very standardized point sometimes with UIs in these types of games. And when we saw the initial prototypes for this, it was just so refreshing and super cool. So I just want to say, like, from a visual aspect and a UI aspect, you're doing a great job, intern. And I just,
Thank you.
on your next 1-to-1, it's going to really shine.
Can I get a job?
No.
Oh,
So shout
get
out
some more
to
coffee.
Chris, by the way. Let's do shout out to Chris, who also worked on the mockups for the skill tree and talent tree with Tim.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Not sure if he's watching. Chris is on holiday right now, so assume he's not watching this.
Better be watching from a beach.
Oh, maybe. Who knows? In any case, so yes, let me actually go back to the talent tree. So what we can do as well with this is the idea is that you're customizing your superhero, right? You're customizing your DNA essentially. So you're altering that, and as you unlock these skills, you can dive into them to really progress the skill further and do more modifications. So as you kill enemies out in the game, you might find specialities that the enemies can do. So maybe there's an enemy that has a certain skill set, and then you find pieces of their DNA, which you collect, and this goes into your fuse inventory, as we call it. And then you have a maximum capacity for the amount that you can use. So currently I've got 99. That's not going to be the final number. I think it was somewhere around 20. But you can drop these fuses, these sort of DNA cocktails, into your skill, and then your skill does some additional things. So let's actually just dive into an example. You have okay, so we have the tornado skill. This one will just spin around, cannot move or anything, but if I go into the skill creator, I can add things that add movement to it, and can add extra buffs to my friend to my tornado. So now I can actually move.
Yes. And this is where that modular pattern really comes to life, right? Where somebody wants that kind of ability to get out because maybe they're built a little softer and they need to be able to move out the way. They're not gaining anything by being hit maybe as a passive. They need to keep kind of like branching further away from the fight. And that's going to suit that type of player. That modular approach is just so sick.
Yeah. And what we also wanted to achieve with this is that you can kind of puzzle in your own abilities. So let me upgrade this one a little bit and unlock one of the on start nodes. And I'm going to add a dash to this one.
Mm-hmm. And just to point out to people what you're doing there is that, again, that fuse, particularly the one you're about to drop in now, will be at the very start of that action. That's where it will kick in. And just to really pay attention to that with those fuses.
And now my ability dashes essentially. So this is how we customize our abilities, and you'll be killing enemies and find more of these as you go out there, and then you get more options to explore with your skills, and you're freely able to change these sort of skill creator nodes out. This is your little piece of the puzzle for your ability. So if you find something new, you can try it out.
Also, they come in variations with their stats and specifics. So there's a lot of variety in terms of like what actually drops and how good is that drop.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fuses themselves, right? So the fuse themselves has a standing stat, and that will mean that like getting a better fuse for a similar action is going to be of benefit to the player as they go forward. They need to swap those out.
And let's see. What else can we show? Maybe we can show the.
I can ask you some questions because I mean the chat is kind of kicking off there anyway with a few that are really designed around the UI and everything. And I suppose everybody's like super impressed, and they're also saying that they're loving the pattern of stitch heads liking hexagons. It is definitely a recurring theme. I think we'll
coming back indeed, yeah.
Company tattoo day maybe.
We said on Compounds, no hexagons, and at one point our entire UI was hexagons and our entire game was hexagons.
And then
we're doing it again.
We were thinking let's avoid hexagons indeed, and there's just no avoiding of it. It just works. It just works well.
And
Also-
on that, because you mentioned Kabounce, or sorry, go ahead. Yes, you were going to say something.
I just want to create some excitement for it because initially I always thought that hexagons were really boring in terms of working on them, but from implementation dev side, I actually got really excited on the hexagon math that comes to it. Like it goes deeper than I initially thought working on this game for the hexagon math basically. So
Why
just
did
want to
you
get
also
some
have to bring
excitement
it
on
back around to maths, where I would get instantly lost and feel
Sorry.
my numbers dyslexia kicking it so hard.
Hexagon math is cool. That's what I was saying.
I need grinds. All hail the hexagon, says the chat. So, from a design point, I suppose, where did you start designing this from? How does UI like this come to be? Where do you start? Pen and paper. Where's step one when you try and decide on this?
Oh, I mean, I think UI is UI and user experience is baked in a lot of the systems as well. So I think the first thing is create an inventory of what you actually need to make, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And that's not just from a visual point of view, but I think that's what you get to later. But first, I think you need to assess what kind of things do people expect, and there's also looking at other games already and going like, what is the things that people have been learned? What are the customs? What is expected? Um, yeah, and then you start with, or at least I start with a wireframe, which is the most basic of things I can make, and it's just about flow of where do menus go and what menus go where, and it's essentially a block out, I would say. It's just squares. You just put squares, and you just say like arrow. It's gonna go here to this screen, and then that's gonna happen. And you start pulling in features, feature by feature, and you go like, okay, this is sort of like from a really high level. This is my overview of where things need to go, and then you look at what feature did I miss? What situations are going to occur in this? Do I need to think about console? Do I need to think about different control schemes? And then from
That's
there on, you
interesting.
start
Yeah.
building out.
Because obviously we're approaching this game with keyboard and mouse. That is what it's being designed around. But we're talking about controller. We're considering it. You obviously have to consider it with the UI. You don't want to have to come back and try and address such a complex system later on for a controller because you built it so heavy toward mouse. Let's say. So it's
Yeah,
interesting to
no,
keep that kind of thing in mind. Yeah.
no, exactly. And I think you either keep it in mind, or yeah, otherwise you're gonna have to redesign it or make a second UI. And I think that's a lot of work for the game and for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's also not elegant in general, indeed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What is your pet peeves about UI in games? Is there something that you come across as a UI designer? You sit down, you open up a game, brand new game you haven't played it before, and you're like, "Here we go, UI." What is the one trigger that you have that just like ticks you off? I have one in mind, but I want to hear what yours might be.
Right. I mean, I think it's really difficult because it's. I mean, of course, there's the default ones that are like a cutscene is not skippable, right? Those are the ones that everyone usually hates because they're like, I don't want to see this. I've seen this a million times. I just want to keep playing. I want to be forced to watch this. Um, but I think other than that, I think a more generic one, I guess, could be that it's. I don't like UIs that are well. I can appreciate UIs that are actually very beautiful, but if it's form over function, that is also a concern. If it's really beautiful, but I keep getting lost and I'm using it and it's just not intuitive and I'm just annoyed, then that's not good, right? And it can be as beautiful as it is, but it's not performing the function it needs to fulfill.
Yeah.
So,
Even as a wireframe, it should function already, right?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's also really difficult because there's so many edge cases, especially with UI. And there's every time something changes in the game, then the UI might not need to respond to that and needs to have a new design or an iteration or whatever. And it never stops, which is actually another pet peeve, I would say, is that last minute features can be really difficult for UI to deal with because if it wasn't built around that or didn't keep it in mind, then it's like, well, doesn't really work. So if something gets made as well without any kind of consideration with UI in mind, you also get those problems like, yeah, UI can kind of look at it and fix it. But I mean, at some points, if there's just an overload of things being thrown at you, that is UX. And if you start thinking about then the flow, you counter an issue. I think from a UX point of view, you need to be able to adapt some of the systems as well to a degree, right? And it's not like UX says, oh, this needs to be scrapped, we're scrapping it. But it might just be a flow or a delay thing, or it can be really simple fixes sometimes. But if that's not kept in mind, then I think from a UI point of view, you can struggle to even make it. And then you look at the final game and you go like, well, this looks like form over function. But what happened behind the scenes? I don't know. I wasn't on the development process, so maybe it was all come together in the last few weeks, and someone dumped a few features in, and they go like, well, it doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. That's really
Oh,
interesting, like keeping it modular for future adaptations for future features and everything that they can plug in and not distort the whole flow of the thing, assuming it had one in the first place. My
it
pet peeve
all comes together.
is slow UI. Sorry, I keep cutting you off, y'all. Go ahead.
No,
But
you go.
my pet peeve is slow UI. If you boot up a game and you're like D-pad up, D-pad down, you know, the shoulder buttons or whatever, and there's just that latency, like it's super latent between the response time of like the input or whatever, that drives me absolutely insane. And it tends to kind of like tilt me. I see you testing it there. You're like, how quick is this UI? Because you make Kabounce, and Kabounce was insane. Like, I would challenge anybody to get Kabounce, go to that UI and try and break it. It is insanely responsive and extremely dynamic as well.
Tim
Oh
polished
boy,
the
now
hell out of
someone's
that
got to come with
UI.
a bug report.
Oh. But Paul, you say you don't like it when D-pad and then it's all slow. But I hate it even more when D-pad doesn't even function. You have to use a stick with the controller. Because that's
The
to me that
worst.
doesn't feel intuitive. You want to have both be functional, people. But for
Big
me,
shout. Yeah.
biggest pet peeve would be the on console games or controller, using controller, that the mouse cursor is directly simulated. So basically, as if you're playing with a mouse on your controller for menus that could be D-pad controlled.
That's a big one. That's
Oh, and grinds
huge,
me.
actually.
I've seen it more than once.
There's big games that do it as well. I won't like go calling them out or anything, but there's a few big games where you're like, really? Like you couldn't have made this like a node select. It had to be this fake cursor. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I actually have
I'm adding that to my list of hate.
when you're speaking of cursors, my pet peeve with cursors is when it's designed in such a way I lose the cursor. Like the cursor's supposed to be there, but I can't see it when it vanishes. Just 'cause
Ugh.
there's so much going on. So you just made me think about that, and I hate you.
You want to stand out, yeah.
Exactly.
Now Tim is disappearing.
Talk
in
to
his
us
lightning
about
strike.
some. Yeah, he's going in. He's starting to add some more skills and some more abilities. Let's go back into maybe the talent selector, and just showing a little bit about how that progression looks when you're in the talent tree, and you're getting points and you're unlocking things. This guy.
Right, let me just. Oh, okay. I can just. I have cheats, so what am I worried about? I don't need to respec.
Nice. So that's us essentially at level 1 right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
what
first point goes in. Yeah. Talk us through this.
So yeah, you're specializing in your. So you level up. You're specializing in your superpower. Um, so whether that's like a brute force combat, lightning, or any other thing that we come up with in the future, you're essentially diving deeper into one superpower. So you can specialize or take a few. Now the advantage here is that you actually have to make a choice. It was what I think is an advantage, because what are you going to specialize in is also going to affect what skills you have available to work with. And some of the later abilities, there might be a trade-off between specializing in one particular skill or in one talent and one superpower, or getting a like really wide scale of abilities. But you can only equip a certain amount of abilities anyway, so there is probably an optimal path towards it. But then you start building out your skills, and that is where it really comes in, and that's what also ties your superpower, I guess, because if you get a certain skill set, right, you want to build your talents for that. So an example could be, let's see. I mean, I was talking about this recently because we're still adding quite a few things, and the UI is being overhauled, so some things don't work yet. So definitely work in progress. Keep that in mind. But let's say that, yeah, a good example. One of the things that we're discussing is items, and items adding those interesting things that synergize with things in your talent trees. So, for example, maybe there's an item. I'm not saying there is, but maybe there's an item that gives a bonus to damage based on how fast you're moving. And while you're thinking, if I'm like moving around like this, I'm standing still when I'm hitting stuff, right? But maybe there's abilities that actually do damage, like the whirlwind or tornado is one of them. Yeah, this one's now stationary, but if you add a fuse to it, so this is how we can kind of start combining everything, then you suddenly have, do this first. You suddenly have movement. Oh, so this is dash. Need Wrong one.
Yeah, passive. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, passive. So now I can move, and maybe if I'm doing this, and I add this talent that increases my movement speed, and then I have an item that actually increases my damage. It's all sort of combining and synergizing, and that's how we hope to sort of inspire people to make interesting builds. And by giving them the tool set that is this sort of ability builder, we hope that they can kind of experiment and really come up with their own unique designs. That's the idea.
That is actually such an exciting stack. I hadn't even really considered that one myself. That is so dope. I really like the way that you kind of chained those ideas together. I mean, this is going to be a huge talking point for the community around this game. It's going to be play styles and then the designs within that play style. Not just that there's one pure path, but that there's going to be something that's going to be the trick for you and your play style. And everybody should feel rewarded for the way that they want to play, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that is also kind of like ties into that, and this is something that I mean, like Jos and I also discussed a lot because we work on the hero characters as well. So internally, we're called the menu heroes, heroes and menus. There you go.
I'm not
But
calling you that.
damn it!
Please
You're
do,
like
Paul.
pitching this nickname. It's like we're thinking about it. We're thinking about t-shirts. We're going to get them done.
Nah, but all right. The one of the things that comes up sometimes is okay. It's kind of boring sometimes to get a note that just says 5% movement speed. But what you also don't want to do is just give a lot, and then after 3 skill points, they're done, and they have a maximum amount of of skill points invested, and they've got like 50% movement speed. That's too powerful because then you get to the really satisfying end result way too quickly. But you still want that first point to be interesting, right? Because what is really annoying is if you gotta go to a skill tree and you go to a certain node and you're like, oh, I'm picking up this node, but it's kind of useless, but I just have to get through it. Then that's what you want to avoid as a user. So what we've been doing is we started looking at giving us these sort of uh, yeah, it's called logarithmic curves, I guess, but it's this sort of reverse exponential where the effectiveness of investing more into it will actually decrease the amount of payoff. So the first point that I put into this movement speed will give 16%. The second one will only give 22%. And then it kind of starts decreasing the amount that I get. And there's still a maximum to it, but we can control that maximum a bit more and we can still make the initial points interesting. And the last point can still be interesting if it gives you extra damage based on how fast you're moving, for example. And suddenly that point is still interesting to take. But if you're going through it as you have a very different build, you're not feeling like you get a skill at 5% movement speed. I don't even notice that. So you still get something that's interesting. Anyway,
That's something about RPGs in general. When you get that deep dive, like I know my years in World of Warcraft, where like every buff starts to count. Like you start to feel all of those small incremental movements because that's what your design is. Like if you're a shadow priest, that is exactly what you're wanting to increase all the time. Any increase toward your shadow damage is valuable. That's what you want. You don't care how small it might be.
I have some questions from chat. If I can interrupt for a moment just to throw some at you. How do you feel about that?
Do it.
Okay. Let's see. Does the skill tree have a hard cap on its size, or limited just by the points you can get?
The skill creator, right?
Yeah.
It does currently have a maximum cap on its size. I think
It's 20.
this is it. Yeah.
Okay.
At the moment.
Cool. Thank
But
you.
it's already quite a lot. So
Yeah.
there's still iterations being made on this. So this is also quite possibly not how you'll actually not exactly how you'll get it in your hands, right? So
Yep.
this is actively being tested, and we have thoughts. The current system, we have a few things that we want to change about it, fix, improve. They're on the list to do. We haven't got to them yet, so we're just showing you a really early look.
Cool. We have another question: Is having 6 active skills a very deliberate choice? Did you already try and test different amounts, especially with the UI in mind?
It was a deliberate choice. However, we've been talking about either reducing it or keeping it because now we've actually kind of created a more natural barrier with the latest. Let me take you back to the to the talent tree. So you're investing. Let's assume any kind of player can get to a level 100, right? And you could get I don't know 100 talent points, and you get some change from from some quest rewards. Well, whatever sources you might be getting more than just the level ups, right? It could be from various sources. So you get these skill points, and you're going to go to potentially 3 talent trees, 3 specializations, in which you can spend about 30 points into one of the main masteries. So that already gives you 90 points to spend in just masteries, and then we're not talking skill points. As you go into one of these skills to customize them, you're spending these same points to upgrade these abilities, which you can do to level 20. So that is another 20 points. So you could have 6 abilities. You could also have less, because if you have 6 abilities that are useful that you've really decked out, that means that I think you're really short on anything else, and I don't think that would even be possible with the amount of talent points we currently have. So there's definitely choices you're going to have to make. Some skills might be supportive, and other skills might be your main skills, right? That you really actively use a lot. Now, that also means that currently the UI has 6 skill slots very defined. Maybe that'll skill more. And this is one of those things where I'm saying a feature changed, so now the UI has to adapt. And that is
Yeah.
sometimes very difficult and annoying, but it happens because this might be the better user experience for the players, and it's the better choice for the game, but the UI does not support it.
That makes perfect sense. And I have one last question for now, and that is, will there be a testing range where you can try out ability combinations without expending ability points?
This is actually an interesting thing. We talk about a lot. We already have the training dummies, as you can see, the target
Yep.
dummies. We definitely want to see if we can give players ways to test things. However, we're not sure that we have something like that planned for early access. The first things are first, which is making sure that everything you get is fun to play and it's all good and balanced and all that stuff. And that's already a really big challenge because there's so many components to a game like this. So the last thing we want is to give you a feature that is essentially a quality of life and then sacrificing something that should be part of the core.
Makes sense.
Not to say no, but I don't know if it's going to be in at early access.
Gotcha. All right. I'll let you all carry on. I just wanted to interrupt with some questions there. Thank you.
Want to go through another one of these talents? I feel like we've looked at whirlwind. Do we want to stay in one of these talent trees, or do we want to move to any of these?
Let's see. Well, okay. What do you want me to do, Paul?
I like the lightning one. I just like the effects. I want to call out the effects a little bit and just talk about how beautiful the effects are in this game right now. Are you going to tell me we can't?
Lightning one has not got the latest additions yet, but
all right, come back. We can come back. We don't have to go into it. I've been messing around with it a lot, so I'm just like, it's so pretty.
The lightning stream. Stream.
I love it. It's the effects are so beautiful here, and I think that like the kinetic feeling of a lot of the effects is something that players are going to love too. Go back to brute force, perhaps you've got leap loaded in there as well. Oh,
we do have this skill, by the way.
Yeah. Yes.
Leap loaded. Yes, I do. What do you want me to do with leap?
I kind of like showing how obviously leap is a static move initially as well, but that you could use it for like combat entry or combat escape, because that tends to be where I tend to figure out what it is that I want to do with it. Am I looking to always just get into a fight, or am I actually looking to use it as an escape route? And that's all down to these fuses as well. It's going to come down to like them on start or passive.
Let's see. I mean, target dummies cannot be knocked back, but I can already do it.
And the amount of ground you can cover there is like, it's so beneficial. Because when you start getting swarmed and you really need to bounce out, that's one surefire way to do it.
Out of energy, though.
Yeah.
And suddenly your damaging ability also becomes utility, movement ability. It's also really useful.
Yeah.
Please, you're saying jumping out. I'm thinking jumping straight in there. Heck
Come on,
yes.
You're gonna flex on me like that. Like, run away.
I see a mess of enemies. I'm jumping straight in there.
Owie. I have some other kind of questions and stuff here. Because I think that guys are like super impressed, obviously, with all of the UI and everything. If someone was trying to get into UI design as a profession and take inspiration from what you've done here, where's that first step? How does somebody kind of like go about deciding that's what I want to do? Because that's actually a really inspiring thing they might have thought about before.
So, I mean, it's also really difficult because I don't know what people's skill sets are, because I cannot I'm not good with drawing. Like, I cannot draw a character for the life. I will draw a stick figure for you, and it'll be a beautiful stick figure. It'll have uneven proportions, and you'll love it.
It's
I say
me.
confidently. Yeah. Draw some hairs on it as well. That's also fine. But one thing that I'm pretty good at is color control usually, and using shapes and animation in my designs. So
Nice.
how that came to be was, I think, because I started as a hobby sort of project way back when I was younger. Started picking up Photoshop, and I just started. I think first I started with just making some sort of effects banners and whatnot, and then I started working on websites on the side and on snowboard designs and you name it. And it was like I had a lot of random things because I was working in the hospitality business and the restaurants, and I was always off when none of my friends were off, so it was really
Yeah.
awkward. And it was like I needed something to do, and I got into that. And at one point, I built a website for someone on a commission, and it was like, and that was also really brute force. It was not the most responsive, but this was like
Mm,
early 2000s, and I had no ambition to kind of like do it as a primary job. I never
mm,
thought that I could actually make it into a job.
mm,
But I kept doing more and more, and then I started going into game development, and I just started specializing more in Photoshop, I guess, and Illustrator specifically.
mm,
And I think where it's really easy to start out is, I think if you start with like a single settings screen, like a settings menu, just graphics options, just that. If you can make that look good and clear, and you
mm,
think about the user and how it's going to flow to the other menus, if you can do that, you're already a long way, because I think those are usually one of the more complex menus to start out with initially. Even though they've got a lot of, you can make it really simple, right? But it's still,
mm,
there's still a lot of information you're providing to the user, and it has all the
mm,
functionality that you need. Um, Usually, so I'm kind of lying. Usually, the most complex ones are the most unique features you have in the game. So
mm.
this skill one, for instance, is a really complex one. It's quite a
What
head
was the
scratcher
what
for
was the
me.
most challenging actually? And I want to ask Yas too, as far as implementation goes, because you were designing it visually. You're obviously getting a lot of feedback. You're working with Chris as well to actually create the thing. And do you want to just pull it up on the screen there, just while we're passive, just because I kind of want people to always be able to see some portion of it, maybe the talent tree. And like you're
Right.
working on it visually, but I guess from an implementation aspect, I want to hear from Yas as well about how challenging is a system like this, from that implementation point of view.
So the thing about the skill tree and the talent tree, but especially the skill tree, is that it's a system that we've been building from the very first prototype of Superfuse. So it's gone through many iterations, it's gone through many phases of development, improving over time and adding new features, of course. Um, and that by itself is just a lot of complexity of figuring out all the puzzle pieces. Also in terms of design and in terms of implementation, how do you keep it all compatible? How do you keep it flexible enough as well for iterations? Because when you go through especially a core feature as such, something that you don't have that much reference on, uh, you'll go through a lot of iteration, and then you want to make sure that it's flexible enough to be able to go through this iteration, but still have it be robust enough that changes, of course, won't do any damage.
Mm,
So in that sense, and you also want to be capable of getting new features, new content in easily. So core architecture. You first want to design the architecture before you start programming. That would be like my main advice on implementation for something like this. And
mm,
yeah, always keep evaluating what you're actually making and if there's any restructuring that would be useful in the long run.
mm,
And then the UI part of the implementation on this iteration has actually been one of the lesser complex ones from an implementation point of view, because we already had a lot of the tools for it out there. So it's a matter of hooking up the things that we had. The
that's
more
so cool.
difficult ones are the ones that are more manual labor of setting up, and here we have a lot of tools already, and we have a lot of like the skill grid and the talent tree. They're all being generated essentially based on the implementations that we've already done.
Oh, that's a little behind the scenes there. Was that the that's the editor grid, eh, for the
That is
screen?
the other good, yeah.
Nice. Screenshot that, chat. Screenshot it.
Yeah.
Grab it. And I also love something that you said there, Tim, about how your history with UIs is from everywhere. It might be from everything you see out in the public, every kind of interaction that you have as a user experience with something. It could be a menu that you're looking at, or it could be just like an app, I suppose, is a great way for
Yeah,
people
yeah.
to understand a UI and like what is happening as you're looking at the UI and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can go into a lot of directions because even something like a medical equipment might need UI design, right? A car needs UI design these days.
Yeah.
It's like everything has UI
Hmm.
design. It's everywhere. And I think the best ones are actually the best UI designers. They're not in games because I think those some like medical industry and all this stuff pays way more
Hmm.
money. So then the best ones you'll find the UX designers you'll find in those kind of industries. And I think it's also really interesting to do those because I think in a way, a website is sometimes much. It's simple. It's also interactive, right? But it's simpler than games sometimes because I think there's less different aspects to it. So also the tools you start in with are usually, in my opinion, like Adobe XD and is something that I like to use. I like the Adobe suite a lot. I know there's other ones like what is it called, Proto? I forget the name. I have it written down, but it's there's many tools to actually work on prototypes for UI design, and there's some people swear by the other, and others will swear by paper, whatever. The problem that I usually have with it is the things that I want to do in games with UI, I cannot do in those prototypes because they're made for more website oriented things, which is fine.
Hmm.
You get flow of menus, which is absolutely what a website is. It's just a flow of menus.
Hmm.
Um, but games have so much more interaction with like inventory slotting, deslotting. It's like it's
Hmm.
it's it's all these interactive baskets you have to work around with, and numbers changing and flying up on the screen. It's like, oh my god,
Hmm.
A lot
so much
more
going on.
sudden feedback that the player needs
Yeah.
for all the different actions that they can do, or something that's happening to them while they're not even doing anything.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Plus, also when you make a UI in a game, it also you don't. That's not your entire canvas. The canvas is the game, and your UI goes on top of that and needs to collaborate with that canvas. You're just supporting, and with a website, yeah, you're making everything right. The entire thing is UI essentially.
Hmm.
So I think that's always a little bit different, and I think it's actually making websites quite some fun in my opinion, but it's very different.
Well, I tell you, I made a few MySpace pages of my own back in the day. Have you know about my UI history? Could show you a thing or two, Tim. Maybe after this call, I'll bring you through my old
Re-
HTML
Remember,
files.
remember the 95 websites, like the websites from the 90s with all the like
Welcome to my
green
geosites
background, red
page.
color. Oh, red
Wait, so we
font, green background.
so we can get your stick figures and combine Paul's UI and MySpace abilities. We'll get something special going.
The new
True.
Raw Fury website is going to be so lit.
Oh, that's next year's
Class.
April Fools. Like, that's it. Done deal. I'm making it happen.
Swap it all out.
Hey,
Trash
I'll
it.
I'll charge you like the medical industry would.
A big old invoice. I have a slightly outside the box question, but I want to stay back on. I guess I want to maybe look at the chat. Is there any questions in there? Anything that people have
Oh, I've got
regarding this
one.
UI and everything? Yeah, let's
So,
do that.
so we
Let's
just
feed
got a
them.
good question. I do not know if we can answer it fully yet, but I'm gonna throw it at you anyway. How much do you think of inclusion features like colorblind mode, reducing flashing, etc.? So accessibility options. Is this something that has been discussed or thought about at all?
Yeah, every time we do UI, it's with everything. So this is actually a really difficult one because I don't think you can actually tick all those boxes with like just color. Like even in commands, I think we made it pretty good for colorblind mode because you actually actively looked at it. But not to say that you can cover all the boxes because there's more than one type of color blindness, and some people have all the
Yep.
color, and it's
Yep.
it's quite difficult, and especially if you want to sort of for the majority of the people who will not be fully colorblind and who will still be able to enjoy these colors, you have sort of a desire to make it with all the colors in mind. And that's why we usually try to look at everything from audio, icons, shapes, and colors. So colors is just one aspect of it. And we usually go like the shapes need a hierarchy. So you need a hierarchy of shape language in the UI. We need iconography, and we need good font support, and we need some audio feedback. Have all those, then usually anyone can at least operate it or figure it out. Yeah. Yeah, and still sometimes you see things pop up and you go like, did not expect that. And
Mm.
it's you're working on it, you're looking at the thing for the entire day, and you're going like, yeah, I got everything right. And then someone else uses it and you go like, that's not what I expected. And
Mhm.
you're reiterating again. So you're iterating a lot and it's testing. And I think if someone who has any kind of disability comes in to play the game and then there's an issue, that's fair. I mean, I don't have any disabilities, so I'm in that sense privileged that I don't run into those. And then I think that's good feedback to take in mind. And then sometimes it's things that you really want to fix, but you can't. Like in some cases, it's also just a lot of work to keep accessibility in mind, and it's also a problem.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but just like you said, like if you're staring at it all day, you get used to seeing it, and it's not till somebody else points out something that you're like, oh yeah, that's right. So it's a team effort for sure.
I've definitely found that the new design is like super intuitive. Like it was pushed out to us, and there was like just use it, and don't ask anything. See how it works. And I just found myself clicking through it with this logic. And I think that UI should be a seamless thing. It shouldn't feel obstructive. It should feel like it has this natural flow, and that things happen that you expect to happen to a degree. There's a bit of learning obviously to do regarding our fuses and all that kind of stuff, but I really think that it's been designed with a very, very fluid kind of meta. So I'm excited to hear what players will think about it when it gets out there. I say excited, also nervous.
There's one exciting feature, by the way, that we haven't shown yet. I don't know if today would be the day, but if you put in a I don't know, let's say mirror or a fork indeed, and then you can put another fuse in there. Well, this one doesn't have it. This one doesn't have a subslot apparently, but the mirror has, I think. Yeah. So now you see Tim's put in the mirror fuse, and then it has two additional slots in which you can put more. Yeah, you first have to enable the
Right.
upgrades next to it.
Did I design
it? I'll basically allow you
Also
to
what
have
happens?
an additional layer to it. Maybe try rotating it. Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is also where you get bugs. Oops.
It's very fresh out of the oven, all of this.
Yeah, this is very fresh.
That's not even a bug.
Oh, do it again. Yeah, there we go. Now it lit up. And I mean, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so now there's a fork inside the mirror. So the mirrored one will also be forking.
There's that glorious lightning
I
effect.
just saw-
That's all I was hoping for.
I am cheating.
Yes.
I am sorry. I am cheating.
I just saw Tim's face just light up as soon as he did that. I was like, woo!
Lit up by lightning.
Yeah, I'm also cheating. We actually have a new system here where these fuses also have a limit in how many you can slot in.
Yeah, so you can't stack your one Thunder X with 50 splits.
Yes.
Oh, why not?
I think the PC will have a very sad time with that.
And the damage for a single target is not good. Just shotgun them. All right.
And of course, all of that damage and everything else is going to be affected by the kit that you're wearing, and other kind of peripheral talent choices that you may have slotted in there.
You got a stack of corpses laying in your gym, in your dungeon.
Yeah.
Standard.
Let's see.
Well, don't we all?
Okay, that's exactly what I was saying. I was like, can we bring up some mobs and do the jumpy on them, please?
I can do one better. I'm just gonna spawn some enemies.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's that up and down.
Yeah, nice.
Oh.
And of course, that like chews into your energy resources, but
yeah,
it's worth it.
I mean, this skill is also way too like this skill is. I'm not supposed to have this skill at this level, so it's kind of.
That's okay. You're allowed. We'll let you off this time. Paul, was there any other questions you had about the UI today?
If you could design or redesign the UI for any game, what would it be? I don't want to move you off topic too much here, right? I feel like we've shown quite a lot already with our UI. I'm just asking you some questions.
I mean, actually, so I do think that like redesigning any kind of UI can be a lot of fun. I don't have time for it, but it is fun. So I actually think that if I had to pick one, I think I'd pick a game that's really good because but it has kind of like a UI that seems to have suffered from too many features. I think coming in near the end, and that is GTA 5. I think I would kind of want to. That seems like a really complex one. That's very challenging. There's a lot of
That's
menus together for
huge.
GTA Online, right? It's just so many different things connect. Like just trying to figure that mess out, and then kind of going like, how does this all connect to each other? As I
Yeah.
think that's probably what that's what I expect that happens a lot is working on UI, and then at one point there's another feature and another feature and another screen and a screen more. And like this doesn't make any sense anymore. But we're shipping in a week, so well, it is what it is. Yeah.
Sellotape it on.
And
What
then
about you,
it's just
Yas? If you had to change up an existing game's UI, what would that be? And I know UI isn't necessarily your forte. You are implementer, developer, coder.
It's any menu that doesn't support D-pad controls or uses a mouse simulation. That'll be my main iteration.
Back to his hate. I think that's a very noble cause, Yas. I would like to see you do that for all of those developers that didn't.
It'll be my goal for the rest of my life.
Any other questions in the chat? I can see
Not-
some things. Guys kind of talking amongst themselves there a little bit about the UI.
Yeah, I wondered. We did have some questions from the community that we talked about earlier. Do you have those on hand if you wish to ask them?
Pull them up.
Because I can't click on anything right now, or you'll all
Uh,
disappear.
All right. And actually, I guess one slightly still on UI topic is like one of my most like wow moments I think in the last like 10 years. And I wanted to ask you guys if you had any real like wow like spectacular moment in gaming in the last 10 years or so, something that made you kind of go wow, that's like magical in its own way. Mine has probably been VR, I would say. I think for all of the different VR games I've been playing lately, the intuitiveness of UI and how developers have to think about their approach in those environments is so fresh because it takes away all of the comforts that we have in like a 2D space. Now, sometimes you can cheat it. You can basically just have a pop-up 2D UI menu in your 3D game. But some guys get super, super intuitive with it, and it's impressive to see.
Whole
That's like
different
my
approach all of a sudden, right? It's cool.
yeah, it's definitely
Ooh,
my favorite
I,
UI.
I don't know at the moment, honestly.
It's a difficult question, there, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I just I'm gonna have to bring the Oculus over to the office and just strap it onto your head, leave you there for about 5 hours, and be like, "Did you see anything?"
I think this was also mentioned in chat earlier as well. It's difficult because really good UIs you don't think about it, right? You're not supposed to see it in a way that you are thinking too hard on it. Like the best ones are those that you just gel into and become intuitive.
Yeah, and I mean, I also don't know. This is also the scary part because I also don't know if I start reading. I'm not actually looking at chat, so I have no idea. If I start reading the chat, will I suddenly go like, should I change all the UI?"
You're good. There was one little question about the mission text on the right hand side.
Right.
That right now it's white, and so it's a little bit harder to see. Somebody had mentioned that, but I did say that everything is probably going to get another look over. Like we are in that stage of development where it's like we're still looking and thinking at things. But otherwise, no, people are not being mean to you. You're good.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. 'Cause that could also happen, right? You go on a stream, you've got
No, lots of good
mindset, and suddenly
questions.
everyone hates it.
No,
We have a
lots of
wonderful
good
community.
questions and lots of positivity about this, and people are excited. So yeah, heck yeah.
I'm trying to find where Tim had answered these questions a little while ago. I think I have it here now.
I believe in you.
Yeah, I found it.
Oh, we do have a question. I got a quick question. I'm going to throw it in because I can.
Go for it.
Will the UI be locked, or are there parts that can be moved by the user?
So actually, we talk about this sometimes. It is actually super difficult to make. I mean, it's because UI has relationships with each other, right? So everything on the screen, like there's different menus that get created constantly in the background. So UI also has a performance cost. I mean, should I open one of these things? Do that.
Yeah, go.
do that.
If you
Actually,
want to
in
do
the
it,
editor,
go.
this is.
Yeah, if
this
you
is
want to do
not,
it, go for it. Like
we'll
whatever you're comfortable with.
Maybe you start at the base with the game menu and go from top to bottom there. I mean, very top would be the main HUD, but actually that could also be interesting. The main HUD is also a bit more what people see in the main screen.
Yeah, you want that one?
Yeah.
HUD.
Because Yeah, that one contains the main the game menu as well, so it can basically show everything in its layers. Yeah, so this is the primary widget essentially that's covering all the core elements of the game, so we can keep track of them easily and manage them, right? So we can instantly see all the spacing. Don't have to mess around with all these different widgets that are being spawned at runtime. No, we just have an overview, and there's optimization options within Unreal for this as well. So there's not, if they're not updating, then it's can be really cheap.
In the chat, Octagon's noises intensify.
Yeah, Octagon's noises intensify.
Yeah, so but the difficult thing is that all these things have relationships with each other, and there's I mean there's definitely things you can do. It's not like it's impossible or anything, but it definitely has a time of development of its own, right? So if you're thinking about because you're also when you're making UI, you have to think about well, what if someone has widescreen? What if someone has this aspect ratio? What if and then because things have relationships to each other, and sometimes like these things are on top of it, they're also anchored towards those things. So you change something else and something else changes, and readability of text comes thing. What if a user opens up the game, they open up the menu, and they go like, oh, I don't like big UI, slides it all the way down. And like, well, so you need to find the sweet spot for that, because then they go like, well, it's scaled down all my fonts and I can't read the game anymore. And then it's a bug report on your forums. You go like, oh, well, okay. And then you're trying to figure that one out again. Or then it's like a crucial feature that gets missed, and then people go like, I'm not sure where I need to go. And it's like, oh, did you scale the UI down? Oh, there's actually this one is has a relationship with that other thing, so now it's scaled down too much, and then people go like, ah, I'm lost, and bug report actually made the feature. So it's something that I would definitely like to do, even from just a from especially from a UI UX point of view. That's fun to do, to kind of like think about those relationships and hierarchies and make something that's responsive and robust to handle it. I'm just saying it's not an easy one, so I would like to do it, but I don't think I can make promises on it.
I would just like to say, as somebody who plays computer games on a 49-inch super widescreen monitor, I appreciate when I appreciate the developers thinking
Just
about
worry
UI.
so much.
Yeah, it's
They
just
worry
like
so much.
thinking
Fiona,
about like the
what have you
readability.
got?
It's the Odyssey. Was it G7? The Samsung one.
Is it the G9? I've got the G9.
G9. I think it's one of those numbers, but yeah, yeah.
I didn't know we were a widescreen family.
It comes with some problems. I could talk for days about video games UI on that, but that's what happens when we're being butts and not sticking to the regular monitors. That's our fault.
The scaling thing is really interesting, Tim, because I know that what you're talking about there, if you did drop down that, and I tend to, if a game has an option to reduce the scale on that UI, I will tend to scale it all the way down as well, just to get that screen real estate back. But like our status icons at the moment, like when your health injections are, and your mana, your energy, sorry, are on cooldown, you get the small status icon, and they're quite small. They're just above them.
Yeah.
If they were to scale down as well, they would essentially become a pixel because they're so little.
Yeah, so that's also like, I think like that's something that we're actually working on. These boosters, these health boosters that we have, which can have so let me actually explain the system. It's also one of those things where you need to make a UI for, you need to figure that out. So we have health boosters and energy boosters, and maybe many more boosters that I'm not going to talk about today. But there's boosters, and they give you a stat over a certain duration or instantly, and they have charges. So, and these charges, they you regain them, so you actually see it go empty, and you regain these charges over time. You also regain these charges as you kill enemies. So there's two sources to regain these things, and the charging has a time to recharge. So there's many different stats that you can get to it, and you can find different rarities of these as well. But currently we've got this little visual that actually empties it out, but you don't even see it because it's too tiny. And then there's a buff effect that's also too tiny. So there's all things to look at. But yeah, if you scale this down, then that also becomes smaller, and then it becomes more difficult to notice. So there's all kind of things that you then need to separate, and you need to isolate in its own menu. And then you have assemblies of menus on top of each other, and then they all become individual assets. So then actually iterating and making it also becomes a lot longer. So yeah, that's why I said like I would like to do it, but it's also one of those things that is really difficult to do when you're not done with the game yet, I would say. I think it's easiest to do when you've got everything figured out. And then we actually kind of did some stuff for it for compounds, but I didn't think we ever made it because it was something that we couldn't get in time anymore. But we started working on making sure that all the anchors and the relationships were okay with the sides of the screens, that if you would change it down, that it suddenly wouldn't like pop out of the screen, because that can also happen. all these things that you need to take into account. And then I think we finished quite a few screens, and that was weeks and weeks of work for us to kind of figure out.
Yeah.
Then you find new bugs that happen.
I feel bad, Paul. I feel like we've bullied the team about a resolution shenanigans when sorry.
It's fine. So a lot of people usually ask about this stuff because I think,
Mhm.
and I think no one ever, like, who the hell gets it in their mind to bring a UI designer on the screen, right? Like, no one ever gets to ask questions about UI. They just complain about it on the forum, and then someone very sad as a UI designer sits there, reads those things, and goes like, "Oh yeah, I know."
I guess I do
Yeah.
suck, but it's just like I think everything you've said should give players the assurance that like your
Thinking
consideration
about it,
for
yeah.
so many complex possible outcomes that players might come across, and your ideas towards solutions for those should give them a lot of faith in the UI that they're going to be presented with in Superfuse and how it can kind of
Oh,
work with them. I'm serious, man.
Expectations.
I'll talk you up. I'll talk you.
patience. Oh no. Yeah. No. Yeah, but we're working on a lot of things. So need the mission UI might be something that still gets a look at. Yeah, I mean, we currently have it that you can actually click here and go to your talent tree. Yeah,
Mm,
there's definitely a lot of things that we already have, and I mean, I know that its back button needs to change still because that's a placeholder. But
And the things that can be quite challenging with all the scaling and the different aspect ratios is if you have something like in this screen where it's from all the way to the left, all the way to the right, but it's not supposed to cover the full screen. Then with different aspect ratio, you're gonna see like there's nothing on the side of it. So then you kind of need to extend that, which on the other hand is also more expensive for the game. So it's it's always a consideration how do you best fix
Absolutely.
that. But we've even seen like big titles that still had issues with that. So
For sure. There's any number of big titles I could boot up on this screen. Fiona is definitely the same, and you'd see the UI fall apart very quickly under a 5120 by 1440p
Are you
resolution.
so I
So,
actually for work I do not use that monitor just for that reason because I do not need to give myself that pain and suffering. I just have 3 separate regular monitors for work and then the big one is just for video games. But yeah, even just using it, it's a lot. It's a lot of work in the UI for all these resolutions.
oh yeah, and there's also these little things that also pop up because that's also where anchors come in even more.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have a tiny little bug here that we still need to resolve, and Jos and I have been kind of like annoyed by it for a while now. Because if you look, this works fine, but actually it loses focus while you're still on the button. See that? It's
the
really
lightning
tiny.
has that the most. If you click,
Yeah.
and then
Oh, there you go.
there you
It's
go.
off. And then you start inspecting it. What's going on here? And it's like, oh, well, this UI gets created on top, and it's a top layer, and it gets added later. And it's like, well, and this gets spawned into another widget, and it's referenced somewhere else, and it's used in different screens. So it cannot be in the same one as this one necessarily, because it also needs to be in a. So it's like all these things start stacking on top of each other. And you
Yeah.
get a bug somewhere. You're like, oh, okay, that's it. Okay. So now we need to make sure that this is not, yeah, non-hit,
Yeah.
like
100%.
ignores that click. Yeah.
that attention to
We
detail is awesome.
we
So sick.
are heading close to time, so I just wanted to check with Paul. Is there any other questions you'd like to throw out there to the team?
I don't think I have anything right now that isn't going to just derail. Do we have anything else in here? Or hang on, we can go and ask. We can ask some of these open questions we had earlier on. Yeah. I think this is off of
Pick
UI
one.
topics.
Yeah, pick
I
one.
will.
Let's have a fun one. I don't know what it is. Pick one.
Well, hang on, because I don't want to throw him for too much of a wobble either. What's that?
Wobble, wobble.
Mean. Now that I closed. Okay, I'm back.
Really curious about the whole entire list you got there. Then
Oh, you don't want to see this list. No, I guess to try and like give the community a little something. 1, 2, 4.
That's okay. We're just watching Tim smash things. I really like watching all different combinations and seeing what you can do with it. It's wild.
We could ask this one, which was, are there already plans for end game modes? Would they rather be infinite scalable content or fixed difficulty with various predetermined difficulties? Because this is something that I know a lot of people want to know. When they start off a game, they want to know what happens when they start to kind of cruise toward the end of it. I can ask the question again if it needs clarity.
Yes. So end game modes. actually something that we're looking at indeed, and that Jos and I is also looking at a menu for. But, cannot discuss too much about it yet, but it's we're looking actively at. We just don't know the details yet because we're actively developing it. So things are so prone to change at the moment that we just don't know. But um, do expect that there is definitely gonna be an end game, and that we think that's something that just needs to be in these type of games because you need to be able to farm, you need to be able to level up, and yeah, I mean, it's just I think it's a no-brainer. But how exactly are we doing it? That's still a little bit up for debate. I think there's definitely going to be multiple difficulties to it, and there's going to be something to keep in mind that the players can also level up. So there needs to be additional challenges later on. But again, it's kind of like what we say with UI and UX design. What are the things that people will need from the game, and then that's the problems that you're going to solve with.
Nice. It's a very PR focused answer. I like it. You're like dodging through the wires there. It was really good. I was very impressed.
Thank you.
All right, that would be my last little hot seat question, I suppose, for the devs today. Are we kind of good to wrap up from your side as well, Fiona?
I think so. I mean, actually, you know what? I'm gonna be really naughty, and I'm gonna sneak in one more question because this is from a member of the community who has been here throughout the stream, and they were asking in regards to UI, when translating the game into other languages, especially ones that read right to left, do you have to take that into consideration with the UI?
Yeah, so this is actually this is one that I did a lot of because we supported Arabic in Cabounce. Yeah, so there's actually options in Unreal. Thankfully, Unreal is a really powerful tool. But there's options to support the UI going to different side. However, we don't have the capacity to actually design it for like inverting all the UI because they also like you would expect the buttons to also appear on the other side, right? But actually making that support, that's a whole different question. Like to kind of paint a picture, I know that there's games that people work on and they work on it with a team of 20 on the UI. And here you have pretty much myself, Jos, and then a concept artist who occasionally supports us with it. So it's a very different size that we're working at, and I'm not even
this
full-time
indie
UI
development,
designer.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm doing it now, but before, I think before a month ago, I hadn't looked at UI for what was it, like half a year again, because I was having all kinds of other tasks. So, yeah,
The
I
other
mean,
hats.
yeah. So yes, actually, something that we looked at with Cabounce, and something that I kind of keep in mind in some regards, but it's mostly that I keep in mind that the boxes can support text in different fonts and that they can scale, right? That they can fit the text. But for Japanese and for Chinese, it doesn't matter as much anymore because those people have gotten so used to Western apps. This is from my understanding and research, by the way. I don't know if it's entirely true, but I've done a lot of research on it, and that indicated that people don't mind as much anymore because Twitter is also used quite a bit in Japan. So they've gotten quite used to the sort of the left to right UI. That's quite normal now, and they still have like advertisements from bottom to up and those kind of things, and then I think right to left, but it's not for UI as much anymore because they're so used to these Western games. And people don't want to make games, and also in Japan, they don't want to make games that are like have multiple UIs because so costly to make UI and then make a different UI for every country. But yes, localization ideally supports full on support. That includes the UI and the legibility and the icons. I mean, there's icons that you just can't use in all the cultures because something to keep in mind. And I know of some of them we actually have quite some people from different cultures in the office, so I do ask them for those opinions. So we have someone who is actually native Chinese, and some of them hear things where she just points out like you cannot put that in the UI for China.
Gotcha.
Like, oh, really?
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just don't know. I mean, that's also a challenge.
Yeah.
That was a really good reply. And because you can't see chat, I'd just like to say the person who asked the question, Foxify, they said thank you, and it's a very interesting response. And yeah, I think that's us for today. We got a lot of juicy UI shenanigans out there. More than we thought.
We did, and the UI looks so awesome. It's very exciting. It is a really, really exciting part of the whole game experience in general. It's still being worked on, everybody. So what you see there, and obviously what the shipped product will be, might differ ever so slightly, but it will only improve Thank you for joining us today on the stream. Tim and Jos, thank you for taking time out of the day to come and
thank
hang
you.
out here on the stream.
Thanks for having us.
Fiona, thank you for setting all of this up as well. You
No
legend.
problem. Hell yeah.
And to the chat for hanging out and asking questions and
Yeah, thank you, chat. You've
supporting.
been great today.
Yeah, straight up. Right, we'll say goodbye. Until next time, fare thee well.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Everyone. Bye.